Welcome back, everyone. This time I want to talk about a franchise that I surprisingly have not talked about yet on this channel, which is a Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And this is one of those franchises, it's one of the big three horror icons, like, ever. Like, him, Freddy, and Michael. Or, I mean, him, Jason, and Michael. Where all three of these franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th, they all are the ones that people always go to, always talk about. They're the most popular out of any of the franchises in horror. And definitely the big three, especially on Killer Flicks on Facebook. They definitely always talk about these three, which is totally fine. It's just, it's funny that these three are the ones that really always are talked about anywhere in the world when it comes to, like, big horror franchises. And this is one of those franchises where, to be really honest, I enjoy these movies, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but they are not, definitely not any way as rewatchable as Halloween or Friday the 13th for me. I don't know why. There's just something about them where they are still great. For the most part, they are still great, awesome films. Like, there's always a couple in these franchises that are just not very good. But this is one of those franchises where it's not as rewatchable for me, unfortunately. I just don't ever, I don't know, I never feel the need to rewatch this all the time. Even though I love the first three, and I like the fourth one. Don't really like the fifth one. Freddy's Dead, I am iffy on, and New Nightmare I really like. And the remakes just, I don't know how to really describe that one. I'll have to rewatch it. But these movies, though, a couple of them I do really love, but they're just not as watchable, like rewatchable for me. But the first one in particular, Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street, I really think that this one, like, there's nothing I can really say that's not been said before about this. Just like how if I talked about Halloween on here and how I talked about Friday the 13th, the originals of those too. There's not anything I can really bring to the table that's different because there's so many people that have reviewed these movies, obviously, because they've got such big fan bases. So I'm just going to talk about the stuff I like, even if people have said it before, because I feel like I'm going to be repeating a lot of people's opinions, but oh well. That's how I feel about it. So starting out, I thought the opening was really cool and really creepy. I loved that the aspect ratio was really smaller, so it made it seem even creepier in a way. Does that make sense? Like, it really works on that level. And it's just him making the glove while it's in the smaller aspect ratio, and then whenever he gets it fixed, it, like, zooms in on the title, and it's really cool. And the music in this is great. It's really memorable. It always felt to me like the scores in this franchise, like, they really feel very nursery rhyme-ish, which makes sense because the theme in this movie sounds just like the theme when the kids are playing jump rope, the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. It has a very childlike nursery rhyme score, which is really cool, and it actually is really creepy. And I really like that Wes Craven directed this. He's really a great horror director, or was, like, R.I.P. of course. Been a couple of years, I think, but he was always so, like, all the horror movies I've seen him do are great. And this is definitely one of his best that I've seen. I haven't seen every one of his, but I really think that this is one of his best. Because this one, not just because it's a really, like, is a really creepy movie. It just is a really unique horror movie as well. Especially when it came out in 1984, when it was just, like, it was the slasher craze. And this is a slasher, technically, but it feels more like a thriller because it does have slasher. It is a slasher in a lot of ways, but it is very much a thriller because these characters are kind of losing it over trying not to sleep. And like I said, this is a very unique horror movie, especially whenever it came out, and it still is today, because using these dream sequences, using a character that haunts you in your dreams and kills you in your sleep, that is really creative and really cool. And apparently Wes Craven got this from a real life I guess real life thing. Like he said something about how like there was these kids in another country that were like they like this one kid wouldn't go to sleep, and whenever he did, he died, and he literally stayed up like for a crazy amount of time. But he literally died after that, and then I think that's where Wes Craven got this idea from. Which, so this is technically, like, I mean, of course, it's not the fantasy element, but this technically is based on something about a kid not wanting to go to sleep and then he dies, which is unfortunate. Whoever that kid was and whenever that happened, it had to have been before this. Like, I don't know when, but that's unfortunate. But the idea of this is just really, really unique and really cool, and I really think that it is underrated in that fact, even though this is considered a classic. People don't ever talk about how this is, like, in terms of, like, using dream sequences for scares and kills, like, that is really creative. Like, the opening with Tina where she's running around is really great. And I like the fact that it makes her look like the main character, and the remake does that too. And I think that that's one of the better things about the remake. But I like the fact that they did that in a way where, yeah, it's been done before in, like, Psycho, where, like, of course, obviously, main character is not the main character, and then somebody else comes in, and then I like how in this one it's the same way, but it's way quicker. So it feels like it's more, it doesn't feel like it's quote-unquote ripping off something like Psycho, where it's like, because Psycho took 45 minutes for it to happen, and in this, it took like 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, which is totally fine. It's just, I like that they did the main character who's not really the main character, and then she dies off. But I think that they still did a good job. Like even though it's been done a lot, like I said with Psycho and a lot of other movies, but they did a good job with this with the Tina character, because they really focused on her, and then Nancy was just there in the background, and then Nancy becomes the main character, which is really cool. I just think that, again, it's something that's already been done a lot in horror movies, but I like the way they interpreted that, the first to go kill, and she, like, you just think she's the main character. And I like the fact before Tina dies, she and Nancy are having the talk, like, that they're both having the same dream, and they both are imagining like literally the same thing in their whenever they're sleeping. And I liked how, if you didn't know what Freddy Krueger was, if you saw this in 1984, not knowing anything about Freddy Krueger, no sequels, no anything, this would have been a lot more effective, and it still is effective. But in the way I mean that, I would have wanted to see this in 1984. That would have been cool, but like, I like the idea that this is kind of a mystery, like, who is this guy? And like, whenever he kills the first person off, it probably changed it changed the game for a lot of people watching horror movies in 1980, like that's just so cool that, like, something's different with killing kids in their dreams as opposed to, like, just in real life. Like, that's really a cool, unique idea. And Tina's kill is incredible. That is one of the most unique kills I've ever seen. It really still holds up because Tina, like, is being chased in her dream by Freddy with his big long arms, which is awesome. And she wakes up. I mean, she didn't wake up. She's just screaming while he's attacking her in her sleep. And I love the fact that you see Rod, the character, they were sleeping together and they fell asleep. And I like how Rod sees, like, you watch his point of view because Rod gets accused of murdering her, but I like that you get his like, view in the room that's locked with both of them in it, and literally there's an invisible thing just grabbing Tina, running her up the wall. Tina's screaming and then gets slashed in the stomach and just is bleeding all over and flying, dragging up the wall. That, I feel like if I saw this for the first time, if I was born in 1984 or was able to see it, that would have been incredible just to see in theaters. And it still is great, but it's just, I would have wanted to see this not knowing anything about this character, because of course I came into this before the remake came out. Like, I'd say whenever I was like 13 or 14. So, but so I definitely didn't, like, grow up. I mean, I grew up with it in a way because I was a teenager, but like I didn't grow up whenever they were really relevant. Like Freddy vs. Jason was 2003, but I was too young, and then the remake was I went and saw that in theaters. So that was my first one to see. But yeah, it's funny though. That Tina kill is just great. Like I said, it's cool that Rod gets accused of this because, of course, how would you not get accused of that? He's the only guy in there. He was with her at the locked door. Like, how could he not? And then he ran away. So, of course, he's going to get accused, obviously. But I just like that story plot, that story point in this movie. Like, that's cool that he is the one that gets kind of blamed on these murders. So Freddy fucks with them in real life, too. And nobody even knows Freddy exists except for a small group of parents, which you'll learn later in the movie. Then we get to this classroom scene, which I think is awesome, and it does a great homage to Halloween, but doesn't rip off Halloween. It's just in a classroom. Nancy's in the classroom listening to the teacher, who is Lynn Shay. Awesome. That's awesome to see young Lynn Shay. But she's listening to the teacher lecture, and then she falls asleep. She sees Tina's bloody body bag. She says, Nancy, and then like her body bag falls to the floor and gets drugged by an invisible force down the hallway. And I love that she runs into this girl who is like like around the hallway, just like watching for people. And she said like, where's your pass? And then Nancy just goes, screw your pass. And I love the fact that the girl that said the pass, or asked about the pass, is wearing Freddy Krueger's just like sweater, like she's wearing his outfit. But like, since we haven't really, we've saw him already, but like it was in the darkness, so people might not have even thought, like, it's a dream, obviously, but like it just does a cool job of doing subtle things like that. Like at the ending, whenever the car top of the car comes up and it's Freddy's color of his sweater too, like that. Like they do a good job with implying he's there, even though you don't see him yet. And then, of course, the girl does come back up and says, like, Nancy, don't forget your hall pass. And she says it in, like, it's Freddy Krueger's voice saying that to her, which I thought was really cool. It made it really creepy because, again, you see him at the beginning of the movie, but this is the only one where he is really, like, he barely has any lines. He only has a couple little lines. He has a couple more in 2, but in this one he barely has any, which is great. This is why he's so remembered, because in the first one, he is an evil force that is a trickster in a way. Even though the later films, like, completely, like, he gets so obviously, like, hilariously trickster. But in this one, he is jokey, but I love the fact that he is, the way that he fucks with everybody is really great. And the way that he, like, does jokes like that in a dream, like he's pretending to just be this hall manager girl, and he says in his voice through her mouth, like, don't forget your hall pass, Nancy. Like, I like how Freddy in this is intimidating, and he's got jokes, but they're way more subtle than a lot of the other ones, like later on, because of course Freddy became a pop icon and he became very humorous. It's like Chucky did too. They did the same thing with Chucky, where it's very humorous as the films go along. But yeah, I really like that scene, and like the scenes in the school, that's great. And I loved the scene in the bathtub too with Nancy, where Nancy is, like, Rod's been taken in, and Nancy's just in the bathtub, and she's trying not to fall asleep. She knows what's going on. So she's in there, and Freddy, like, which is a funny thing, like, he doesn't do anything sexual to her, but that image of her in the bathtub with her legs spread out, and then his gloved hand just comes out of the water right between her legs, even though he didn't do anything nasty to her, like, that's effective. Like, even though nothing happened, that's creepy in a way, because it's like, ooh, he's going up from between her legs. So, and then he pulls her under, of course, and that's really a good scene. Again, like the way that he messes with reality, like he pulls her in the bathtub, and then like it's literally like an endless amount of like under in the bottom of the tub, like it's an endless amount of water that she's being dragged under. like a pool, which I guess is what they probably filmed her in. Whenever or her double, I don't know if that was actually her, but whoever that was, whenever she got pulled underwater. But but yeah, I like that scene a lot too. That's a great scene. Um, and then we get to the point where Rod, since he was accused, he's the one who gets killed. But I love how Nancy gets the foreshadowing of that in her dream, and then she goes in and she's trying to get her dad to let her in, like, because he's the lieutenant, like, come on, let me in, let me in. And then she gets in there, her and Glenn, and then Rod's hung himself, but you see that Freddy literally tied a blanket around him, hung him up into the wall. Which, again, just, I love the fact that he messes with these people in a way where it's truly, like, he's just like a horrible dick. Like, he's a killer, but he's a dick as well. Which I think is just hilarious in a way, even though he's horrible. Like, he's a horrible human being, of course, but it cracks me up that he does this many things to make a point across that he's this much of a dick. And I like, after this, Nancy goes to the sleep clinic, and you don't see this. You just see her asleep, and the mother is watching, and the doctor, and she wakes up after flailing and screaming, because, like, Freddy's getting her in the dream, and then she wakes up, and her hair is gray, and she has pulled out Freddy's hat. And I love how this is the mother's moment where she changes her attitude, like, she thought that Nancy was just kind of acting up, or because of her friends being killed. But then I love the fact that this movie does a cool story twist where, like I said, if this is the first one, you didn't know this if you didn't see any of the other films, and if this was the first one coming out, you wouldn't have known what this was. But I love the fact that you get the realization that whenever the mother finds the hat that Nancy pulled out of her dream, she tells Nancy the whole truth. And I love the fact that Nancy's mother is an alcoholic. Like, she's hiding something, and you realize what it is right then. And it's really a cool realization, because she says to Nancy, like, because Nancy says that it's Fred Krueger, it's the person in my dream who's been attacking me. And then the mother comes clean and says, like, that she and a group of people around town literally killed Fred Krueger by burning down the boiler room where he was at. And they did it because he killed over 20 kids in the town. And they knew he was like, he obviously did it. But she said something complicated, like, they didn't sign a search warrant, and then he was off scot-free just like that. And the mother's acting in that scene is really, really great too. I forgot what her name is in real life, but that actress who played the mom, I really like in this movie. She's really good. But I love that scene where she tells the truth, though. Like, we killed him. We set him on, or we literally burned down the place he was in, so he couldn't have hurt you. And then Nancy knows that it's actually happening. Like, he's getting her in her dreams. So I really like that. And then I liked how it went to Glenn's death, which is great. Because, again, it's so iconic. Just like Tina's death, this one is incredibly iconic too, because Glenn, played by Johnny Depp, of course. I know everybody knows that, but I didn't mention Glenn really until, like, the end, because I didn't really think he was. I mean, he was in the movie, but he wasn't really, like, I don't know, not super important. But Glenn's death is great because he gets pulled into the bed, and then, like, his blood goes upward, up in the ceiling, just keeps going up and up and up. And the mother comes in screaming and realizes this, and, like, that's just such an iconic death too. This one has incredibly iconic deaths for any horror movie ever made. I truly believe that. The scene, like I said at the beginning, with Tina's death and with his death, or with Glenn's death, they both are such incredible kills. And again, so inventive because of using dreams and using him as an invisible force in the real world, and doing that, like pulling him in the bed, or having Tina being pulled and dragged up the wall, bleeding all over. Like, just, it's great. Really great. His death is awesome. And I love how it starts, like, this is basically the ending now, but I like how Nancy sets all these traps. It's a pre-Home Alone, in a way. There were a lot of moments where I was like, hey, that could have been like something at Home Alone, because she does things. She brings Freddy out, like she pulls him out of the dream, and what she does is she rigs all these traps in the house because the windows are barred shut by her mother. So she sets all these traps. Like she has like a little hammer fly down on the door whenever Freddy opens the door, and she has like an exploding light bulb, and she has like lights him on fire. Like a lot of those things reminded me of Home Alone. Just doing all those little tricks. Like I didn't know if this got Home Alone got inspiration from this type of movie, but that would have been funny if it did. But I like the fact that Nancy actually like gets him out of there, and her father gets in there, and then you realize that Freddy already killed the mother, unfortunately, which really was sad to see. And it's great because then the dad and her like see Freddy go into like their mother's corpse gets pulled into the bed, and then Nancy is locked in the room with Freddy, and I love the fact that she says to him like, I don't believe in you anymore. I don't believe in you at all. I want my friends back. I want my life back. You're nothing. You're literally nothing. And I love the fact that even though this was, of course, retcon because we had sequels, that was so cool that, like, you could kill the villain by not believing in him anymore. She literally just said, like, you're nothing. I want everything back. I want my friends. I want my life back. You're nothing to me now. Like, all your power is gone. And then Freddy tries to get her, and then he just disappears. And then, of course, it gets the ending that wasn't the original ending, because I think Wes Craven didn't want any sequels. He wanted it to be that she defeated him. She defeated him because he had no power over her anymore, so then all her friends and family were back. But that wasn't the case, because the ending to this one was, like, obviously the theatrical ending for every release for this movie was that Nancy goes out, it looks all happy, like everything's fine, and then the mother's there, the friends are there, they get into the car, and it's got Michael Myers' color of his sweater on top of the car whenever it closes on him. Of course, locks him in, and Nancy realizes it and sees the mother just waving really creepily. And then Freddy pulls her through the window, and then it ends. So, like, I mean, that's totally fine, but I would have liked to see, even though I do like a lot of the sequels, I love the first three, but, like, I would have liked to see if this ended that way and we just never got another sequel. Like, that's a great ending to this movie. Like, literally, if we didn't have any sequels, I would have been fine with this ending. Because I love horror movies where the hero defeats the villain, but of course that almost never happens because, like Halloween Resurrection taught us, it's like you can never defeat the villain. You always will lose. So movies like that, which it's never really ever the case with horror movies. The heroes usually always lose almost every time. But still, regardless, this ending is still good. That, like, it just ended on a scary note, but it's like, I would have liked to see if, like, it ended on a good note. It's like I said, I wanted the hero to win, but it's okay if she didn't, I guess. Now, Freddy in this movie I want to talk about, because this is his first one, and he, like I said, he's not very talkative in this one. And it's such a weird, jarring difference between this one. Like, if you watch this one and then you watch, like, Freddy's Dead, it's like, whoa, there's a big difference. But in this one, I love the fact that he's this maniacal, almost silent type killer like Jason and Freddy, even though he speaks more than they do in this first one than any other movie Jason and Michael are in. But I thought that he's just... Robert Englund, of course, sells this role. It's of course the reason why he's famous. It's of course his best role. But I love him in this movie, and I love him in all the movies, honestly, even the ones that people don't like Freddy's Dead. But he's so great in this movie, and I love the fact he has so many creepy moments without being very talkative. Like, I love the fact whenever at the beginning of the movie, whenever he comes to the wall, like, to Nancy's bed, like, Nancy's sleeping, and then you see, like, him pull, like, out from the wall to grab her, and then, like, that noise happens, so, like, he goes back into the wall. That's really cool. And again, so many creative and unique images in this movie, like that. Or whenever Tina has her first second dream and like Freddy has the long arms. Again, that's really cool. Or whenever Freddy gets her or runs up at her in her dream, and then Tina pulls his face off and he's just got a skull. That is so cool. Like, just again, like, he's a jokester in this movie, but it doesn't overtake the horror of it, which I think is really cool. And for the first, I know at least the first two. I don't remember if the third one really. Like, I know he talks more in the third one, but I don't know. I'd say the first two, he's really not very talkative, and I like it a lot more that way. Even though I'm totally fine with most of the sequels, regardless, but yeah, and I love the other moments, like whenever Nancy is on the phone and like Freddy says, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy," and then she looks down and a tongue comes out of the bottom of the phone and licks her mouth. Like, that's creepy. And just the way Freddy fucks with everybody again is so cool. He just barely speaks in a way where it makes him so intimidating, even though he's got jokey moments in this movie. But again, it's nothing like Freddy's Dead, where it's so obviously like Looney Tunes humor. Which, again, I don't hate that movie, but it's funny to see such a distinct difference between this one and like that one. And I'm not even saying New Nightmare, because that's technically like a meta movie. It's not even in with the other Elm Street movies, the first six, but I really, really enjoy this movie. I do. It's just not as much of a watch. Like, it's not as rewatchable as, like I said, Halloween or Friday the 13th. But there are a lot of fantastic things in this. Like I said, Robert Englund, of course, every movie he's in as Freddy, I love him. Heather Langenkamp is great in this movie. She's got a kind of whimsical way of acting, though. It's not bad. It's just very I don't know, like, how to describe it. At first, she seemed kind of like Flower Girl-ish, the way she kind of talked, but I don't know. Like I'm not saying it's bad at all. It's just a different way of acting. I thought it was interesting, but I really love her performance in this movie. She's great in the third one too, and New Nightmare, of course. But you also feel a lot of sympathy for the Nancy character, because she's losing all her friends and they're all dying, and then she's got a mother who's an alcoholic and a father who's separated. They're separated. So, and she's trying not to fall asleep. Her life depends on it. So if you really feel for this character, and having them not going to sleep makes this movie more terrifying, because you have to go to sleep. You can't avoid sleep. You will literally die whether Freddy kills you in your sleep, or you will die from not sleeping. So I love the fact that this is such a creative way of for a horror movie. Like, this is just a very creative horror movie. And the use of dream sequences, like I said, are incredible. They are just so incredibly unique. Still unique, still incredible. Like I said, the kills are incredible too. With Glenn getting sucked into the bed and like blood coming out, or like Tina getting dragged up the wall, or like, and like there's other kills that are just okay, like Rod just getting hung, which is just okay, but like the visually pleasing ones that use the dream sequences effectively are cool. In this franchise, no matter if you love or hate any of the sequels, I feel like they all have really creative kills. And really creative imagery and just very unique. This whole franchise is very unique. So I loved rewatching the first one. Like I said, it's just not one that I watch all the time. I would rather put in a Halloween or a Friday the 13th if I wanted to rewatch a franchise. This one's just not super rewatchable, but I guess that's a good thing, because I do forget how great a lot of these movies are, or good they are. So I really enjoyed rewatching the first one. So this was a really fun rewatch. It's been a year or two, I think, since I've seen any of these. I've seen them a million times, but like not in a while. So overall, this one was awesome. I can't wait to talk about part 2 next.